Hello, and welcome back to the MindMill Podcast. I'm Seth Marcus, musician, entrepreneur, and life enthusiast. On the MindMill, I explore topics that fascinate me, from art to academics, business to body composition, from comedy to cooking. I connect with the brilliant folks who specialize in their field, and we drop in on the details. The MindMill Podcast inspires connection and community through presence, productivity, and vulnerability. The MindMill. Find your purpose, fuel your purpose. Today's episode is with Carley Smith. You can find her at Fairy Gutmother on all the socials. Carley is a nutritional therapist with a deep understanding and passion for gut health. After using nutrition to heal her own debilitating Lyme disease, she decided to dive deep into the world of the microbiome and help others reclaim their digestive health. Carley is a wealth of information, so prepare to take some notes. I loved this conversation. Not only do we go deep on gut health, but we also discuss bridging the gaps between homeopathic and conventional medicine, as well as the immense power of a mindful eating practice. Enjoy. Well, Carley Smith, welcome to the MindMill Podcast.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Of course. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing really good. I'm excited to be back on the microphones. And this is the first one I've done on Zoom in quite a while, but it feels good just to be having a conversation with a new
for you
face.
For sure. Yeah.
I wanted to start today's interview with a story. A few months ago, I was with our mutual friend who connected us, Greg Woodruff, who's also been on the show, and we were hiking in Yellowstone, and we had been hiking for miles and miles. I think we did about 9 miles that day backpacking, and my knees were killing me. I just wasn't ready for that type of trek with that type of weight. And he pulled out, and when we finally unpacked, he pulled out some powdered bone broth, and we cooked it together over the stove, and I drank it. And I have never felt so revived in such a short amount of time. And he immediately was like, "Well, that's all thanks to Carley." And he did in his like smooth Alabama impression, but
For sure.
it was like our ode to you on the trail, way out
awesome.
there in the middle of nowhere. So thank you for teaching Greg about bone broth and having me prepared on the trail.
Absolutely. No, that makes me so happy.
Mm-hmm. He's such a gem, and he's been on the show a couple times, but he wishes us well. I talked to him a couple days ago.
Awesome. Yeah, he's the best.
Mm-hmm. Carley, tell me about where this all started. How did you first get into your nutritional journey?
So I was actually diagnosed with Lyme disease in 2014, and I went the whole antibiotics route, which is most typical for dealing with Lyme disease. And for those that don't know, Lyme disease is typically the kind of tick bite and bullseye rash, and then swelling, inflammation of the joints, and decline in cognitive function, and really just a lot of flu-like symptoms. And I went the whole antibiotics route and felt like eventually I was starting to take medications for my medications, and that they were doing more harm on my body than good. So I went off all my medication and really just started doing my own research. And that's when I started learning about gut health, and that nearly the entire immune system is located in the gut. And so I went on a gut healing protocol, and honestly, just within a few weeks, I started noticing improvements in my health, and primarily my cognitive function started to improve. I started to remember certain things and facts. And so from there, I just knew that this was imperative to get this information out to more people. So I went back to school and studied nutrition, and started my business, Fairy Gutmother, so that I could help spread this information to other people.
Okay. And so how did your own views of your gut health shift as you were starting to learn about this? Because it seems like the great unknown to a lot of us, especially. It's just like you either feel good or you don't feel good.
Yeah, absolutely. It completely changed my life. It really is true that all disease begins in the gut, and the gut is truly the foundation for our health. And so now when I work with people, it doesn't matter what's all going on, if it's autoimmune disease, if it's some sort of like neurological or cognitive issue, everything relates back to the gut. So my advice now is always just start with the gut, and then see what, the pieces that fall into place from there, because it truly is the foundation. And so I really feel like we should be looking at things from the gut health standpoint. And everybody's gut is unique. It's like a thumbprint essentially for you. So what works for you might not work for somebody else. And then that's why medicine should be personalized and, unique to your biochemical individuality, unique to your gut. And I think we're really just sort of scratching the surface on gut health and, what all it relates to and how to use the gut to improve our health and to heal and to strengthen our immune system. But truly after this experience, it really opened my eyes as to the significance that the gut plays in our life. And it's not just diet, it's lifestyle too. Clinical research shows that stress is just as damaging on the gut as junk food. So it really is that all-encompassing lifestyle approach for the foundation for our health.
Yeah, it's something that I reached out to you to hopefully get you on the show because my gut was absolutely just wrecked last year from my own bout of illness.
Right.
And one of the things that comes to mind is at no point was were the doctors that I was working with, and I was at the Mayo Clinic. I was at one of the best hospitals on the planet. Were they really tapping into, well, where is your gut health right now? In fact, it was kind of the opposite route of what you were explaining with your Lyme disease, of how you were on a lot of medications that were wrecking your gut and not necessarily benefiting it. It's hard to say because at the end, the doctors did cure me. I'm here today because of that.
Right.
At the same time, it felt almost a bit hollow, and I'm not saying it wasn't deceitful because I know they were coming from the best possible place, but it's just this line in the sand between natural health and conventional medicine right now that makes me feel so lost between going the route that your doctor recommends and and when you go into the hospital and what they tell you need to do versus essentially taking things in your own hands or working out of the insurance and with only specialists that you meet on the internet or through recommendation. Right. So how do you kind of bridge that gap?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's never, a one size fits all approach. I think that, it's gut health is a very nice supplement to, any kind of therapeutics or medicine that you're currently on, or, whatever protocol you're taking. It really is just astonishing for me that we don't look at diet and lifestyle in addition to anything else. So to your point, if you go to the doctor and you go on a protocol and it's a list of medications, supplemental to that, we also should be looking at the gut and we should be looking at diet and stress and all of these things. So it's not necessarily one replaces the other, but I think that there's a really beautiful connection between the two that you can use that as a supplemental approach. For instance, I had a client that came to me, with severe depression, and she was on antidepressants. And, I'm not telling anybody to go off of their medication, but rather let's work on, there's a lot of research, by the way, between the gut and the brain, and that our mental health relates back to the gut. So it was more like, let's work with the protocol that your doctor has, but in addition to that, let's work on healing the gut and really, using that as a foundation. And so she was still continuing her medication protocol, but in the same time, we were working on healing the gut with nourishing and nutrient-dense foods, healing the gut lining, repopulating the gut with beneficial bacteria. And then after, a course of, a year or so of really dedicated gut health work, she was able to work with her primary care doctor on decreasing her dose for antidepressants. And eventually she weaned herself off of that with her primary care doctor. So I think that there is this amazing blend and relationship between, holistic medicine and more conventional medicine, and especially looking at the gut, diet, lifestyle in connection with other therapeutics. And I think that is really powerful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How do people bridge that gap with their primary physician? That's got to be a question that people ask. It comes up eventually when working with you, right?
It's really hard. I mean, it was really hard for me with my Lyme doctor. I mean, when I brought up gut health and diet, she actually made fun of me. So I totally understand, the struggles of dealing with conventional medicine that a lot of times. It's sad, but nutrition, holistic medicine is really looked down upon or just completely disregarded. And I think it's up to the individual to take that into their own hands or find a doctor that's willing to work with you and that understands that side as well. So, you kind of approach it. What I tell people is to approach it like, interview your doctors, basically, like they're working with you or for you in a way. So find someone that can meet you on that level of where, if you are taking a more holistic approach, are really interested in the diet and the lifestyle in connection, or correlation with your conventional medicine, find someone that really supports that.
Hmm. It seems to be a very, very difficult right now. And I'm just speaking firsthand from, I had been very healthy up until August of 2019. So I just went through so much, and it was very difficult for me wanting to work with someone like you. And not only was that outside of my coverage and they wouldn't help me. Obviously there was astronomical medical costs
Mhm.
associated with my illness, but just going to someone else, the doctor would immediately, or like my gastroenterologist would say, well, chances are they're going to present more confounders into the ability for me to do my job. So it didn't seem like it was as much of like a holistic practitioner coming and understanding how conventional medicine works and how to work inside of with conventional medicine. But it's like the conventional medicine, whether it's by policy or just by personality of the physicians, don't seem to want to budge at all. They see it
Yeah.
as like interference in them doing their own work.
Right.
And that crossed with this kind of this revolution. I just read this book that referred to it as the new biology, and understanding things about your gut health and how that directly affects your brain, and how stress can be as much of a terror on your
Mhm.
digestive system as the foods you eat. Crossed with the fact that we're trying new foods, in quotes,
Right.
for the first time in human history. Like it's not outside the realm of possibility that what we're eating and all these preservatives have direct impact, or in this case, like degeneration and terror on our gut health. It just seems like a lot of things in this world right now, it just seems like
Mhm.
there's this dividing line that just gets further and further, when really we need to be bringing it closer and closer together.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm pitching you to be like, tell me the answer, tell me how to fix this whole thing. But I just want you to know that, like, I really value what you do.
Thank you.
And as a patient, I can see how it's an uphill battle for people who work in your profession to try um, to ensure trust in that relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm optimistic about it. I think that everybody has their own healing journey and health journey in some way. And I joke about gut health being 1 degree of separation. It's like you yourself are struggling with gut health, or somebody, a friend, a family member, a loved one that has gut related issues. And so we are the catalysts in this. And I think that people are reaching dead ends, that they're so frustrated with the route that they've been taking and not receiving any results. And it's just, a Band-Aid after a Band-Aid, but never really fixing the root of the issue. So I truly believe that we are the catalyst in this. And I think that, I'm optimistic that I think the more people that are looking into, diet and lifestyle changes, that it's just, bringing this up to your doctor, your primary care physician. And I feel like the more people that see these benefits in their own health, the more that the healthcare system will shift. But I think it really starts with us. And again, I'm optimistic about it. I think that now more than ever, especially in the state of what's going on right now, that people are concerned about their health, either just through their own, again, personal health journeys, or just wanting to maintain optimal health and want to maintain a strong immune system. And so I think that it's starting with us. And I think more so than ever, people are concerned about their health. So I think it's the future. I believe in medicine and in that way with, food and diet and lifestyle I think it's positive, and I'm optimistic about it.
No, that's great. I am too. When it comes down to it, I just had to vent a little bit about
I hear you.
the current situation. But coming from a place where people don't understand anything about gut health, and then hearing you say like everyone's makeup is different, where does one really start that journey on discovering what is their biome? How do you understand yourself?
So there's a few different ways. I mean, obviously, you can go and get your microbiome tested. You can do fecal samples. You can find, a snapshot of what all is going on in your gut, and that can be helpful to see. That's one way. Basically, I study a lot of microbiomes in my clients, and sometimes I'll have them get theirs tested just to kind of see what's all going on. And generally, I notice kind of a consensus between where we're at, and I think research has shown we're the consensus of people that we have an overgrowth of pathogens in the gut. Generally, just from my experience and from what I've read and research, it's a lot of proteobacteria, which proteobacteria is kind of what I call the lifestyle bacteria, where it's usually if people are not sleeping very well, high stress, and probably not taking as best care of their body. And that's what I found to be kind of the most common, makeup of the gut that comprises the most of the gut. But I think you can get your microbiome tested. But if you are struggling, or if you have any sort of gut issues or red flags of the gut, meaning digestive issues, bloating, gas, constipation, diarrhea, any of those things, or even autoimmune conditions, skin issues, allergies, those are all red flags for some sort of dysfunction of the gut. And from there, does it really matter to know exactly which organisms are out of balance? Not necessarily. Sometimes if you're having cravings for sweets or bread, noodles, those kinds of carbohydrates, that could be an indication of a candida or pathogenic yeast overgrowth. But at the end of the day, you're really going to kind of target it in the exact same way. If you have a compromised gut or dysbiosis and overgrowth of pathogens, you're going to really work towards restoring it in relatively the same way, which is healing the gut lining and repopulating the gut with those beneficial organisms. Now, how you go about doing that can vary from individuals. There's, of course, a few really good gut healing protocols out there. But again, the gut is so unique that it's kind of depends on where you are at. I've never recommended the same protocol for clients. They're all tailored, unique to you, and kind of how your body adjusts to things. And some people kind of adapt a lot quicker than others, or their body responds faster, or some bodies are a little bit more sensitive. So it's kind of you have to be your own little guinea pig in a way, to navigate through all of that.
Sure. And do you recommend that your clients keep some sort of food log or diary in order to monitor what they're eating versus how they're feeling?
Absolutely. And that can be really helpful. So I usually have my clients fill out a 3-day food journal ahead of time. And then that basically tracks what time you're eating, what you're eating. And then I have a column for what you felt while you were eating or after you ate. And it really actually helps people to see and give you a little bit of a bird's eye perspective of your diet and how you feel. People might be like, oh, wow, I didn't realize that. I thought I was eating really healthy. I was eating, nuts for a snack, but I didn't realize that every time I ate that I didn't really feel very well afterwards. So that kind of gives us an indication that, okay, these foods might be a little bit more problematic and troublesome for you. Let's heal the gut and then reintroduce those at a later date. So absolutely, food journals can be very helpful in identifying certain foods that might be a little bit more sensitive for you.
Yeah, it seems like at least in my world, it's been more of the issue is more in discipline and staying the course of keeping a food journal, or really or really sticking with maybe a dairy-free diet for a month, or sugar-free or gluten-free, as opposed to learning more about why dairy isn't necessarily the best for my gut. I'm
Right.
very confident in that these things don't make me feel good. It's staying the course and
Yes.
keeping it out of your lifestyle seems to be the hardest thing, especially here in America, where there's so many social events. Maybe not so much during a pandemic, um, but even then, there's still just as many temptations. And the standard American diet and what is put on the shelves is
Right.
90% detrimental to your gut, as far as I
Yeah.
can tell.
And I think giving yourself the time to heal is the hardest thing for us, especially because we live in just, this like instantaneous lifestyle where like we want it now. And the gut takes a while to heal. I usually tell people you have to give yourself, think about how long you haven't been feeling well. Has it been a year, 2 years, 6 years? You have to give yourself that amount of time to heal. Now, that doesn't mean that you're not going to start feeling better by implementing a gut healing protocol within a year or 2 years, but you have to allow yourself that time. And I think that's the hardest thing, is that people want to just take a pill and be done with it and it be over, and just spend a few days making broth and hopefully that's the end of it. And it's
Yeah.
like, no, it's takes a while, and it's a lifestyle change. But those that commit to that and understand that, those people are the ones that notice the healing, and they're the ones that can reverse whatever is going on. You have to just be dedicated to it, and it is a lot of work, but it's self-love though too, in a way, and it's learning a new way of living, of cooking nourishing foods for yourself, understanding what you're putting into your body, understanding more about yourself. So it's also self-care and self-love in that way, by spending the time of healing and giving your body exactly what it needs. But once you give your body what it needs, the body is remarkable and the gut is incredibly resilient. The microbiome changes within 24 hours. Yes, so that's, it's the gut is resilient and remarkable. It changes quickly, but as far as healing, you have to give it that amount of time to really make sure that that it sticks. The gut lining repairs itself, and the microbiome actually sticks with that, having those higher population of beneficial organisms while maintaining, or keeping the pathogens at bay.
Yeah. So you had mentioned, everybody's a bit different, and it's going to be an independent journey, for everybody. Everybody's path to proper gut health is going to be unique to them. That being said, are there any sort of uh, blanket statements that you do tend to recommend? I mean, I can think of a few of my own, especially after our first conversation. But I imagine that there's a few things that if you eliminate this and you add this, it could be the first kind of understanding of where you truly are.
Absolutely. So, one of the first things to eliminate or reduce is just processed foods, sugar, artificial ingredients. Those absolutely wreak havoc on the gut. So, really reading your food labels, understanding what's in your food, that's definitely the first thing to supporting the gut. And then cooking really nourishing and nutrient dense foods. I mean, kind of depending where you're at, if you're having problems digesting your foods, I really recommend incorporating more easier to digest foods like blended soups made with bone broth, and really incorporating more bone broth into your diet. That's very helpful in healing the gut lining. It's very soothing to the whole GI tract. It's so many health benefits from broth. It supports your metabolism, your detoxification pathways. It's great for hydration. So broth is wonderful. So incorporating more broth, easier to digest foods, and then supplementing with a probiotic. That way you can kind of help to repopulate the microbiome with those beneficial organisms. But some food as medicine approaches would be incorporating more fermented foods into your diet, as kind of acts as like a food as medicine approach for a probiotic. Maybe making your own homemade yogurt, a little bit higher probiotic content than store-bought yogurt. Plus you're in control of the ingredients, so you can kind of know that you aren't adding in lots of crazy sugars or any sort of additives. But so kind of following those protocols, reducing foods that feed pathogens, your processed foods that wreak havoc on the gut, incorporating nutrients that heal the gut lining like bone broth, and then foods or supplements to help repopulate the gut with beneficial bacteria is kind of that overall all-encompassing approach to gut health. And then once you've kind of worked to heal the gut a little bit, and then you can digest your foods a little bit better, I recommend really making sure that you're increasing your fiber intake. Now, if you don't have a compromised gut, this is something that you should just be doing all the time. Our diets are severely lacking in fiber, and the lack of fiber is one of the biggest things that contribute towards a compromised gut. Fiber feeds the beneficial bacteria in the gut. So a diet lacking in fiber means that gives way for the pathogens to kind of grow, and also the beneficial organisms don't have food, so they start eating away at the gut lining, which can contribute towards leaky gut. So incorporating more fiber into your diet is also a huge part in maintaining optimal gut health.
So a couple things came to mind when you were telling me about this big download of awesome information. First, when you say processed foods, I want to isolate cooking oils, because I know that's kind of like this kind of swept under the rug. I think at this point, most people know about high fructose corn syrups and MSG and things of that nature. Where do you stand on different cooking oils, specifically whole oils like avocado oil, olive oil, coconut oil, versus your vegetable oils, canola oil, and other types of more processed oils?
Yeah, so I think there are a lot of awesome healthy fats out there, and I recommend switching up your fats for cooking. So definitely looking into the smoke point for a lot of your cooking fats, making sure that you're not cooking with all of your high temperature cooking and frying with like an olive oil, because that doesn't have as high of a smoke point, meaning your beneficial the health benefits, essentially it breaks down at high temperatures in the olive oil. So you want to kind of keep that at like light sauteing, or just drizzling on salads, and not necessarily cooking with that. For high temperature cooking, an avocado oil has a high smoke point. I really like high oleic sunflower seed oil. There's a really awesome company in Colorado that makes a really good quality kind of sunflower oil. It's Colorado Mills sunflower oil. So it's also high in vitamin E. So a lot of nutrients there, super high smoke point on that. Ghee, which is just clarified butter, is awesome for high temperature cooking and frying, and coconut oil as well. It's an awesome fat to use for high temperature cooking. And plus, coconut oil is antimicrobial, so it's helpful in kind of getting rid of pathogens in the gut.
Okay. My issue that is when it comes to prepared foods and getting salads or sauces and things like that at places like Whole Foods, where you think you're going to make healthy decisions, and yet the ingredients that they choose to make, maybe your broccoli crunch little side dish or your kale salads and stuff, the dressings that are provided are almost always prepared with these modified oils.
Mhm.
That was something that I learned recently. Can you expand a little bit on like the difference between a whole oil and a processed oil?
So again, it really just kind of comes down to understanding reading the labels, reading where your food comes from, understanding the process that people go through. So typically, and it's hard because you might read it on a food label and then later find out that it wasn't necessarily the best quality oil or fat. But finding oils and fats that are cold pressed can be a good indication of a good quality oil or fat. That just means that it really hasn't been treated with high temperatures to break down sort of those health benefits in the oils and the fats. And then, finding brands that attest to really good quality standards, and then you can kind of trust them that they might have a better quality cooking fat or oil. A lot of times, it's hard. You think you're getting really good quality products, then you kind of read the labels, or you learn later on that they might not have been using the best of products. And, you can only do the best that you can do. But I just, reiterate really looking into the food labels, reading on their website if it doesn't say on the label what their process is, reaching out to the company. And I think that's the best that we can do. You just have to keep investigating and keep reading and keep learning and understanding.
Mm. The other ingredient or the other food that I wanted to bring up in regards to gut health is kombucha. And the reason I bring it up is because I love the stuff. It's like that nice. I don't drink beer, so I like that sort of fermented taste, and also the probiotic content. However, there's this constant source of debate about the sugar content in kombucha and how much of it is being digested by the beneficial bacteria, or is
Mhm.
it or by the biotic itself,
Right.
versus how much is still remaining. And then also knowing that added sugars, especially depending on the type of sugar, could directly negatively impact your gut as well.
Yeah.
So can you shine a little light on that?
Yeah, with the kombucha, you have to be careful. It's almost kind of like the new soda in a way. You definitely want to read the label and check the sugar content, and also check the serving size, because a lot of times you might see, oh, only 4 sugars, but then there's 4 servings. So you have to do the math and really understand that there's quite a bit of sugar in what you're consuming. Kombucha also was, from my understanding, originally used as sort of like a tonic, meaning in a little bit more of a smaller amount. And now we have these like giant jars of kombucha. And so I don't think you're necessarily supposed to have so much of it. So I like it. I think it's great in moderate amounts. And again, you have to do your research. Some brands aren't, really attesting to the best quality of of their production, and so it's not necessarily preserving those beneficial organisms. So you might want to look into that. But the awesome thing is that there's so many local producers for kombucha, so it's easier to kind of get in touch with them, maybe shop more of like a local source that's more small batch, handcrafted, rather than sort of mass produced, because generally you might find a little bit better quality that way. And then from there, just remember, moderate amounts. You don't need to be drinking 3 bottles of kombucha a day. Maybe it's more of kind of like a treat or a refreshment, every so often, and in moderate amounts, not necessarily to the extent that I've been seeing in like those giant containers.
Yeah, it's just taken over. I mean, there's massive displays right at the front of grocery stores now. It's
Yeah.
kind of like the naked juice from 10 years ago. Everybody was so
Right.
sure that was the next, Gatorade's bad, soda's bad, but this green juice says green on it. We're good, and
Right.
it had more
Exactly.
sugar than the Gatorade.
Well, yeah. And another thing is that, beneficial bacteria is great, but too much of a good thing can be a bad thing. So, you don't want to be taking, probiotics and drinking lots of kombucha and eating lots of ferments and all of these things. You're going to have a problem. So, and you're not going to feel well. So too much of a good thing can be a bad thing. So, as you work to rebalance the microbiome, or as you work to just kind of maintain a healthy microbiome, just as long as you're getting these foods in your diet, maybe incorporating ferments, a couple times a week, and, maybe taking a probiotic, every other day or so, just as long as you're getting it into your diet in moderate amounts is what you're looking for. You don't need to go crazy, because again, too much of a good thing is going to be a bad thing. So, just moderate amounts.
Okay. When we first spoke, we were talking a lot about the different aspects of gut health, and I wrote down a couple notes surrounding some of the stuff that just seems to start getting really deep into the weeds. So when we spoke on, probiotics seem to be the star of the show. That's what we're talking about in kombucha and in kimchi and fermented foods and things of that nature. Can you talk a little bit about the difference between a probiotic and a prebiotic?
Yes. So great question. So there's actually a few things kind of going around. So talking about, we've got probiotics, we've got prebiotics, and now we have postbiotics. So probiotic is basically your bacteria, your fungi, your organisms that are in the gut. Generally, you can find that in the supplement, taking a probiotic, repopulating the gut with those beneficial organisms. Your prebiotic is essentially fiber. So it's basically the food for the beneficial bacteria in the gut. So, just like I said earlier, you have these beneficial organisms in the gut. They're hungry. What do they want to eat? They want to eat fiber. And that's particularly one of the reasons why the lack of fiber in our diet has contributed to this sort of a global health crisis when it comes to gut health. So prebiotic is essentially fiber. It can come from a few different sources if you're getting it in a supplement, inulin, but chicory root is another source of prebiotic fiber. But even just like psyllium husk can be used as a prebiotic. If you don't take a supplement, some food as medicine approaches to kind of get those same effects, of course, fiber in general, but I love resistant starches. So resistant starches are basically resistant to digestion. They break down in the large intestine by, again, becoming food for the beneficial bacteria. So some of the sources of resistant starches that I love are like chickpeas, so legumes, underripe bananas are actually a source of prebiotic fiber. Potatoes are a resistant starch, specifically if you boil them and then immediately cool them, that helps to kind of boost that resistant starch in potatoes. Winter squashes are another awesome source of resistant starch. So those also are that like food as medicine source of a prebiotic. Then lastly is a postbiotic. And you're hearing a little bit more about this now, but postbiotic is essentially the byproduct of when a probiotic consumes the prebiotic, and it yields this postbiotic, or sometimes I've even seen it referred to as like a dead bacteria or a dead probiotic. But that yields a kind of short chain fatty acid, which is the fuel source for the cells of the gut, of the large intestine. And that also helps to maintain that integrity of the gut lining. So postbiotics, you can actually buy in supplement form now. And I think they're still, kind of, again, just scratching the surface on postbiotics and their impact on the gut. But from what I've read, it can be a really helpful way to kind of back into gut health. So for those people that have a severely compromised gut and they cannot digest fiber, and they have a really hard time incorporating fermented foods or probiotics, starting with a postbiotic can be very helpful. Again, it's that back-ended approach. So really thinking about, introducing the organisms that way through that byproduct or that metabolite, and then having kind of working backwards. Once you kind of get a little bit of healing by incorporating the postbiotic, you can then start incorporating more of the probiotic and so forth.
Okay. Now, so resistant starches are a form of fiber, correct? And
Yes.
and insoluble fiber versus soluble fiber, is that kind of in the same prebiotic area as well, or is that talking something different now?
I think you can get into the specifics of it, but generally, just for understanding purposes, you've got your fiber essentially feeds the beneficial bacteria. So any source of fiber is essentially going to feed the bacteria in the gut, but ones that might be better are more of those kind of insoluble forms or those resistant starches, as they tend to kind of break down a little bit slower and act as more of that food source in the gut. But that's not to say that any other source of fiber is better than the other. It's just really getting into the specifics of it.
Right.
But when you think of prebiotic, just think fiber.
Okay. And my mind is taking me to, because it's prebiotic, does it mean that we should eat it before the rest of the meal? Is that is my logic
not
correct
necessarily. There are some theories out there that we should be eating some foods and separate from other foods, that you want to start, like if you're having fruit with your meal or something, you have that first because your body metabolizes it faster and then kind of move forward. Whatever works best for you, really. If you
Okay.
do that and you feel like better eating that way, I think that's great. I don't necessarily think that you have to take your prebiotic before your meal or anything like that. I like to recommend that my clients take a probiotic with their food, only because, just as what I said, the bacteria consumes the fiber. So I found that those that have complications in digesting can digest a little bit better when they incorporate a probiotic, because it populates the gut with those beneficial organisms and helps them digest a little bit better.
Mhm. So where do you feel, or I guess, how do you feel we got to this point with gut health, to the point where it seems like this truly is like a new pandemic of poor gut health? It seems like we're reverse engineering and working with experts like yourself to rebuild this gut, but for just countless generations before the present, we somehow managed to our digestive system managed to keep going without specifics and probiotics and stuff. We just ate from the earth and it worked out. So
Yeah.
how did we get to this point, Carley?
I think there's a few things. I think it's kind of this global health decline in diet and lifestyle. There's a rise of processed foods, and the convenience factor of TV dinners. And, it was like, hey, wow, we don't have to slave over the stove for however many hours a day, and this is already ready. This is awesome. This frees up my time. So it was sort of the convenience factor that kind of got a lot of that started. And then from there, it's just we stopped eating less from the stopped eating as much from the farm, and direct from our farmers and ranchers, and more kind of centralized from certain stores. And then again, top that with processed foods and that convenience factor. And a lot of the ingredients were swapped out for more particularly unhealthy ingredients, reducing food costs. So I think that there's a lot of things that play into that. I think lifestyle plays into it as well. I think our stress levels are through the roof, that we are completely overstimulated, and that we've kind of forgotten to take time for that self-care. And so it's in that we're eating less nutrient dense foods. We're not eating foods from the earth, getting the soil, and that it's important for our microbiome direct from our farmers, and replacing that with processed foods, lacking in fiber, lacking in nutrients, and that's increased stress levels. And I think over time it's just been kind of a recipe for disaster, and a contributor to this kind of global health crisis. But I do think the good news is that, again, the gut is resilient, and our bodies are incredibly resilient. So just because we have done a lot of damage up to this point doesn't mean that we can't reverse it. And you and me are both living examples of how this can be reversed. That it's you can take control of your health, and just by starting in little bits of implementing better food practices and lifestyle changes, that you can reverse those symptoms, and ultimately get back on the right path again.
We'll put. So I imagine that some of your clients are parents, and my follow up to that is, you know, we grew up, or at least my own experience was, the Lunchables, the fast food, birthday parties at McDonald's. Like we didn't know any better, or at least we like to think we didn't know any better. We knew it was junk food, but we didn't know exactly how
Yeah.
junky it was. Now we're in the midst of this age of information, and there's so much coming out about nutrition and now gut health. Do you have any advice for parents who are trying to impart good eating practices to the new generation that is obviously as tempted by the frosted flake cereals and and all the sugar everywhere as we were?
Yeah, you bet. And it is tough. It's convenience is a huge factor. But one of the things is that there are really good food companies out there making good quality products. So, again, you just have to read the food labels and be on the lookout for them. Another thing is, I always tell people, the gut can handle moderation. So it doesn't mean you have to just, that you could never, eat another processed food, as long as you live. I have the moderation, have that 70-30 approach. As long as a majority part of the time you're eating healthier, the gut is fine. So if there is some time in there where, you have to eat, or you eat a little bit more unhealthy, or it's the holidays, or there's a couple times where, you have to have that kind of convenience factor come into play, the gut is resilient as long as a majority part of time that you're eating healthier.
Hmm. Okay. And I imagine that some of these food companies are also now advertising to children as well. Some of these healthier food options. I just think back to the kids that I kind of interact with, like my little family and stuff like that, and how to teach them without making it feel like they just have to eat the broccoli on their plate, sort of.
Right. Well, and kids are really remarkable. I think like we almost complicate it more. And if you give kids healthy foods, typically like they want that kind of food. And you can make anything taste good. You cook anything in a good quality cooking fat, a ghee, grass-fed butter, season it with a really good quality sea salt. And, you can even top it with a little Parmesan cheese, or an aged cheddar cheese. If you're cooking broccoli or something, the kids will love that. And they get broccoli, healthy food, and it tastes great. So I think that you don't have to sacrifice your favorite foods. You can make burgers, but just make them healthier. Buy a better quality meat, a good quality cheese, and maybe use a sweet potato, instead of a bun that's made with, refined flours and sugars. So there are healthier options out there, and you don't have to sacrifice taste by any means. Just choosing better quality foods is going to make a world of difference in the taste of things. And I think kids are, kids are pretty resilient too. And I think if you make something like that, they see everybody else eating it, chances are that they're a little bit more willing to try it as well.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like there is this concept was brought to me with a conversation with a friend recently. It's called the 100th monkey, and it's a philosophy, or I guess more of a hypothesis, that in evolutionary times it didn't take a majority of the population to instigate a significant change. It was more of like a much lower percentage, but a critical mass of understanding. So that could be not necessarily that 51 of the 100 monkeys need to be using stone tools in order for the rest to follow suit. It can start with one being the outsider, and then two being this weird sect, and then 3, 4, 5. And then at some point, the momentum starts to take over. And I feel like that is like, it's the optimist's dream when it comes to pretty much everything that's going on in the current times right now. The idea that there is this great awakening coming, whether it's through gut health or realization that our current political system is just fundamentally flawed. It doesn't matter which way you skew. It's about understanding that life is way more complex than left versus right, way more complex than, eat this, not that, and everyone's different. Everyone deserves to be heard. And it's an interesting time where we've never felt more divided, but we also have all of the capacity to have more unification than any other time in human history.
Yeah, absolutely.
I wanted to shift going from, some more deep philosophical stuff to something that is really like, I just had to ask you about it because I've brought it up on the podcast before. Two things regarding gut health. One is colon hydrotherapy, and the other would be fecal transplants. And I know this is obviously, a dirty subject, if you will, but I gotta ask you about it because I don't have too many chances to talk to an expert and that sort of stuff.
Yeah. I think, so as far as like what I think about them.
Yeah.
So for colon hydrotherapy, I think it can be helpful for certain reasons, but it can also be harmful. So figuring out if it's right for you, I think that it can be good if, um, let's say that you have been um, detoxing severely, or let's say you're maybe you started on a gut healing protocol and you're noticing a lot of die-off symptoms. So basically, when the pathogens kind of die and they start coming out, you notice flu-like symptoms, nausea, headache. If those symptoms don't subside over the next few days, it can be helpful to go in and have hydrotherapy over a course of 2 or 3 treatments over maybe a month's worth time or so, just to kind of go in and clean out the colon and in the gut in that sense. I don't recommend it too often, because as you clean things out, you are also cleaning out the beneficial organisms as well. So if you do opt for doing colon hydrotherapy, I really stress to make sure that you are incorporating a probiotic so that you are repopulating the gut with the beneficial organisms. Because the worst thing that can happen is that you go in and wipe out, all of the organisms in the gut, and more of the pathogens kind of start to take over because you're not repopulating or doing your part on the diet end of things to kind of get repopulate the gut with beneficial organisms. But it can be very helpful, like if you have prolonged periods of constipation, or if, again, like you're just starting gut healing protocol and you're noticing lots of die-off symptoms, it can be helpful in sort of cleaning things out. As far as fecal transplants, I think that's been incredibly successful for a lot of people. If you really have had a hard time in struggling with chronic issues, so IBS, Crohn's disease, and that can be very helpful in taking, it's, for those that don't know, it's basically you're taking fecal matter from a healthy microbiome and kind of implanting that into your gut, so the body can kind of adapt to that healthier microbiome in a sense. And it can be incredibly helpful for a lot of people struggling with chronic illnesses, especially chronic digestive issues. So I think it's just a matter of weighing your options, trying different things, and implementing protocols and gut healing protocols, and noticing how you feel. And if you're not finding any success with things, that those might be alternative avenues that can be very helpful for certain people.
From what you're saying, it sounds like it starts with lifestyle. It starts with your food choices, what you choose to eat, what you choose not to eat, and then it kind of gets more complex from there. If it's about these transplants or colon hydrotherapy, that's something that is more of an educated next level decision, not necessarily the first, it's not the quick fix that some people may think it is.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can't do look to heal the gut and do colon hydrotherapy, but still hit at McDonald's every day. It's
Right.
not going to happen. So, and healing is in layers. So, you might peel back one layer, and that just might be kind of changing your diet, and then you see where things are at, and then maybe peeling back another layer, and maybe that's okay. Now I might look into colon hydrotherapy, but there's a lot of other alternative medicine and therapies that I recommend for my clients. I love acupuncture. I think acupuncture goes very well with gut health, and just as far as like tapping into the body on an energetic level. So food is great, and then again, that energetic level is just one more layer. There's all sorts of other ways that you can tap into the body on those levels. But again, it's just kind of peeling back the layers and noticing, what works best for you, and then what the next best step is for you in that healing journey.
Hmm. We're getting somewhat close to the end of our time frame today, but I wanted to ask you something that we've mentioned it a couple of times in this conversation about the kind of gut brain connection and calling the gut your second brain. Uh, I've heard that term multiple times, and I understand it from kind of a theoretical level, but can you talk a little bit more about how that works?
So the gut and the brain are connected by the vagus nerve, and so essentially that's where they get the term that the gut is a second brain. The gut really can think, and act completely independently of the central nervous system. And I read in a book, they said the only thing that your gut really can't do is balance a checkbook. It's pretty remarkable, when you look at the gut in that aspect. Nearly the entire your body's most of the serotonin that's produced in your body is produced in the large intestine. And serotonin is that feel-good neurotransmitter. So when we're talking about that gut-brain connection, so many things relate back to the gut. This is like depression, anxiety, even brain fog, cognitive function, and cognitive clarity, and all of that. So I think especially now, as we're talking a lot about mental health and mental health awareness, we really need to be looking at the gut as well, and looking at how that is impacted. And again, like, it really goes back to that same foundation of repopulating the gut with beneficial organisms, feeding the gut the food that it needs to eat, and then working on healing the gut lining.
Absolutely. Well, while also maintaining a mindfulness practice of some sorts.
Yeah, and that's so important that you bring that up too, because lifestyle is such a huge part of it. And I mentioned earlier that I look at some of my clients' microbiomes, and this is really interesting that I'll have clients come to me with dysfunctional guts, and they say, "Well, I have the perfect diet. I eat paleo and I exercise, and but my gut is still messed up." So I'll look at the gut, and sure enough, they have a really high level of the proteobacteria, and they have a great diet. And this just goes to show you that, I mean, in these cases, their lifestyle was extremely stressful and toxic. And this really goes, go to show you that the diet is only so much of it. The lifestyle is such an important part. And conversely, I've seen microbiomes where people do not have the best diet, but they are 100% managing their stress levels, and their microbiome looks a lot better. So, stress is a huge part of that, and finding ways to really take time out for self-care. And that can be anything, to, whatever that means to you. And so, I love yoga. Yoga is a huge part of my life. And there's so many benefits to practicing yoga, but for some people, it's not for them. So what I love about yoga is that it links your movement to your breath and in your mind and in your body. It's like all, connecting to all that, but you can find that same connection walking in nature. You can find that same connection riding a bike, running, I don't know, whatever that is for you, sitting, breathing, and counting your breath, if you can find that same connection. So again, whatever that is to you, however that speaks to you, but it's extremely important to be focusing on the stress management and techniques and things that you can do for self-care. And in our busy and overstimulated lifestyles, I think that tends to be one of the most important things for us. And so sometimes I'll even just, tell my clients, put it in your calendar, put a notification down, and block that time out that literally says for 15 minutes, you have to go stretch your legs and go for a walk, or for, that next 5 minutes, just sit there, even at your desk in your office, and just kind of focus on your breath. But whatever it is, just little moments in time where we can kind of take time out for ourselves, especially now, is extremely important.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I've dabbled in a handful of those different practices myself. I love yoga as well. And I do recognize that a lot of people who have back issues or some serious injuries, it's hard to walk
Sure.
into a vinyasa class or something a little bit more advanced, and you feel unflexible, and you feel stupid, and you're
Yeah.
falling all over yourself. I just like to reinforce that whether it's cooking, running, meditation, anything, as long as it's done with presence and intention, and because it's easy to cook and have and just can be completely zoned out. And as much as I love The Office or Friends or something like that, like, you can watch a TV show and be just as anxious at the end of cooking as you were in the beginning.
Yeah.
The idea of doing something as simple as just being present in the task can be
Mhm.
so therapeutic, and it sounds so basic and easy, and yet when you think about it critically from an outside looking in perspective, there's very few things that we do that are not in some way multitasking,
For sure.
and being present in your task can be the very beginning to starting a mindfulness practice. A lot of people ask me about, what is this mindfulness practice? I suck at meditation, right? And the whole idea is you're supposed to suck at meditation. That's the point.
Totally.
If you spend 15 minutes or 10 minutes or 5 minutes, whatever, and you at one point throughout the torture that is that 5 minutes, at one point you go back to your breath and just recognize that you don't have to be so upset that you're meditating. And just one time, that's like getting your first pull up.
Right.
And then
Totally.
next time you'll be able to get 2 pull-ups in or something like that. So that's what I like to reinforce with any sort of mindfulness sort of practice, is that as long as it's done with intention, and that you're making sure that you're being present in the task and not trying to do this with 12 other things. That would be my 2 cents in that.
100%. That's completely well said. Yes.
I appreciate it, Carley. The thing that's been coming up recently, especially in regards to food and eating, is I grew up Christian, and we'd always pray before a family meal. And, for better or for worse, I had my rebellious phase where I kind of left Christianity behind and went off and did other things. But I realized that there was so much of that spiritual education that is so valuable. And whether or not I want to label it as Christianity or whatever it is, I find it's really important to bring back the form of prayer. And so whether it's praying to Jesus or Allah or Buddha, whoever, having just a few moments of intentional breath or prayer before a meal has been just huge shift for me, to just be like, okay, this isn't just another task I have to do. This is like a pleasant, enjoyable part of where I'm choosing to let this really enrich my body. And I imagine that the physiological shifts to your body while you do that allow digestion to just rapidly uptake.
Yes, there's so much to be said about all of that, and there's a lot of research, about mindfulness and mindful eating, and intentions around our food. And the first thing is that you have to rest to digest, I tell people. So if you are in a state of fight or flight, your body's not going to secrete digestive enzymes needed to properly digest your food. So that's the first thing. I actually have worked with a lot of clients where I tell them to write down little mantras or words or phrases. And I used to do this at my wellness retreats when I was doing retreats, that I'd cut up little pieces of paper and have it in the middle of the table. It's kind of like your chips and salsa. So you just kind of pick out a little phrase, and it says something, it's, uplifting, that you can kind of focus on while you eat. And there's a lot of research behind what our thoughts are while we're eating. And I have this whole theory about holiday eating, how it's less about the food we're eating and more about what we're thinking in our head. And there's actually this research that talks about this, about how this researcher, it's called the milkshake study, Alia Crum, I think was her name. And she had 2 different groups of people, and she gave them both the same milkshakes, but one was labeled census shake, fat-free, and 100 calories. The other one was labeled, indulgent, decadent, 600 calories. And she measured their ghrelin levels, which is a hormone that is secreted, it's for digestion and for metabolism, essentially. So she measured these levels, and what she found was that the metabolism actually spiked for those that were consuming this indulgent shake versus the ones that were consuming census shake, but they were both consuming the same shake. And so all this was showing was that all that changed was their mindset while they were consuming it. So these indulgent shake people were like, oh boy, this is 600 calories, this is going to fill me up. Where these people were like, oh my gosh, this is, 100 calories. It's fat free. I'm going to be hungry in like an hour. And so, the whole basis of this study is the power of our mind and what we think and what we feel. And my thought and my theory is around the holidays, like maybe it's less about the foods that we're eating and more about our stress levels and our feelings of feeling guilt and shame when we eat, versus, just kind of enjoying what we're eating and not necessarily worrying about it. So to your point, I think kind of taking that time to pause and being grateful for our food and, has a huge impact on how we digest our food and how we assimilate those nutrients in the body. And I also tell this with my clients about supplements. Those that are really averse to taking supplements, I really try to work with them on a food as medicine approach, because if you are like taking your supplements and you're like, I hate this so much, I hate these, it's not going to do as much good on your body. And that's true, if you're eating, like if you're drinking your broth and you know that this is healing you and that this is nourishing your body and being grateful for, what this food is doing for you and what you're giving to your body can have a tremendous impact. And actually, I truly believe you heal faster and you feel better when you approach things with that mindset. So I'm happy you brought that up, because there is science out there that does support, the emotions related to what we're eating and how we're feeling and all of that. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, it seems to be a common theme with most of the episodes that I have, is it just boils down to mindfulness in whatever your passion is: athletics, performance, entrepreneurship, gut health. I mean, it's wild. The placebo is a very, very real thing. I mean, call it a placebo or just call it, your intention, like what you're putting into it.
100%.
Carley, I am so grateful. And I want to take a second to just say thank you for giving us your expertise and your time. I really, really appreciate it. Would you mind sharing with the listeners how to get in touch with you and what's kind of coming up for Carley Smith?
Sure. So just, staying connected at social media, on social media is just at Fairy Gutmother. My website's fairygutmother.com. And I put out a monthly newsletter the first of every month, just with exclusive recipes and articles that I've written, anything like that. I am coming out with a 8-week wellness course, and hopefully in mid-February. So basically it's a diet that I helped develop that's clinically researched, that's proven to help really boost the microbiome and enhance the beneficial bacteria and fungi that are in the gut. And so I've designed this course around this diet, so that there's a diet that you're on for 4 weeks. And then the first couple weeks of the diet, meal prepping, learning about the foods, and then the next 4 weeks implementing the diet. And the last couple of weeks are transitioning towards more of a lifestyle approach. And then throughout the whole course, there's gut health videos talking about biofilms and the foundations of the gut, leaky gut, all sorts of things, and cooking demos. So it's a lot of really awesome information. There's some yoga for gut health videos and meditation in there as well. So I talk about lifestyle in the gut. So I'm really excited to be hopefully launching that soon.
Awesome. Well, I'll be tuning in for sure.
Yeah.
And I just speaking personally, your social media is fantastic. I love
thank you.
How just personal it is, as well as informational. So,
I appreciate it. Thank you.
So
thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Of course. Check out the Fairy Gutmother on all the socials. And Carley Smith, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for listening to the MindMill Podcast. If you loved this episode, check out some of the other MindMill episodes. They're all free and available at themindmill.com, as well as all major podcasting platforms. Also, please take a moment to leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. It's incredibly easy and really is the best way to support the show. Stay tuned for more MindMill episodes coming down the line. I'll keep them interesting for you, I promise. Take it easy.